Hi, everyone. I'm Dallas Steele, and we're talking today about the penis implants. A lot of you know that on Facebook, I've been pretty out there in presenting and sharing about my story, but this is taking it one step further because I have with me Kevin Roderick, who is also implanted, who has also gone through a similar story, not only in terms of the first implantation, but also now a revision. And Kevin, we had our revisions almost at exactly the same time, right?
Within a day.
And it broke about the same time, the failure that we had.
Exactly.
Well, I want to start before we get into revisions because that's like in our book, that's like a third chapter, right? But
Yeah.
I want to start with going back to your very first implant. When did you have it, and what led you there?
I was just over 2 years ago. And, as usual, ED led me there. And, by the time I was in my 50s, and then you start taking Cialis and that sort of thing, at least starting out just for parties, and then more regularly. And, then when you don't have confidence that you can perform, uh, that's a bad thing.
That
Uh,
confidence is everything. It really is.
it really is. And, there's no confidence like having an implant. It's just through the roof.
For sure. So you got your implant, you said, how many years ago? Your first one?
2 years ago, after a couple years of using Trimix, which, I would advise anyone skip that step.
Yeah, well, I always tell people I'm not here to disparage trimix or bimix or quad mix. I am here to say don't overuse it and be careful with
Mm,
it because it's a powerful drug that if you use too much of it can do damage, can and will do damage. And
right.
that was my story 5, 6 years ago after, 7, 8 years in porn doing studio porn, they want you to be, hard sometimes 7, 8 hours in a day. And I was doing 2 and 3 shots in a day.
Wow.
And so I started to get a curvature and I started to lose sensation in one side. And finally, I went to Dr. Faisal Yafi at UC Irvine. And he said to me, he's like, you're not going to have a penis left unless you do something.
Hmm.
And he's like, if you keep injecting like this, you're going to destroy your penis. He said, why don't you consider an implant? So I got mine 5 years ago. And so it's for me, it's worked out really well. And you were talking about that issue of confidence. And after I got my implant, my confidence level, not just, for sex, but for everything else, like went through the roof. Suddenly I felt unstoppable. Did you have that experience too?
Precisely that experience. And I didn't think that I was in a bad psychological place beforehand. Like many people that we talk to, clearly know that they're in a bad space. I didn't feel that I was, but then when you're on the other side of it, you realize, oh my God, this is a different world psychologically.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a big difference. And I think a lot of men kind of discount that a little bit, and how that confidence, I'll say confidence in the bedroom, translates into confidence in other parts of their life. I mean, what in anything, if you knew that you could not fail, that you would do, right? And
Absolutely. And did.
And suddenly, I found myself after the implant in some situations that I would have never put myself in to start with, just because, well, I'm not sure if that's going to work out. In terms of
Right.
like a group play activity or something like that. There's no way in hell I would have ever tried like the fornication party or something like that. And I'm
Right.
curious if you had that same experience.
Well, precisely. And growing up, I was the sissy that was picked last for anything athletic, and then to have that totally be turned on its head, and have guys that are 30 years or more younger waiting for their turn because they know that you won't fail
Right.
is mind-boggling.
Well, along those same lines, people ask me, well, how do guys react when you're shooting with them and they learn that you're implanted? And my story is usually that, about 25 to 40% of the time, they don't realize that you're implanted. And we'll get to how little of that works later. But, I have never had anyone react badly to it. No one has ever run out. Quite the opposite. I would say most guys who identify as bottom, if you tell them that you can stay hard forever, they're on board with that.
Oh, no kidding. I've had zero negative reactions. And as you say, unless I tell them, uh, at least at the beginning, before lots of people knew that I had it, they didn't know, but they're thrilled.
Do you find it works out better for you to tell them? I mean, in terms of, just you thinking about, are they thinking about it? Do you feel like it's best to tell them ahead of time?
The reason I do is because I'm an evangelist. Uh, because all these guys just it's amazing. They're so thrilled to hear there's a real solution for them, and so I want to make sure that the word gets out as much as possible, as you have done so brilliantly for all these years.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're both kind of on that same page. We'll mention that later, but Kevin actually has a website called bionicrod.com, where he has made his implant part of his, can I call it porn identity? Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
part of your online porn identity, which I think is incredibly admirable. I mean, I think I've been out about it, but not quite as forward as you have, at least not yet.
well, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it for the fun. I have to admit, because it's tremendous fun, and it's just outrageous to be able to have sex with such hot guys and and have it filmed. But because I realized, well, that's a way to get the word out to a lot more guys, a broader range of people.
Yeah, I've been, impressed in the last couple weeks with this, how many people have messaged me and said they had no idea that this option was available, and it
That's
surprises
right.
me because, the internet's been around for a while. And if I ever have questions about anything, I'm online researching. How do you not know about this?
Well, that's the way your mind works, and I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's most shocking to me about how many physicians are utterly ignorant about it, including way too many urologists.
Yeah, yeah, you would think that they would be completely up on it. And the fact that gay men, in terms of how we have sex, and certainly many of us, the frequency in which we have sex is considerably different than straight guys, right?
That's an understatement. Yes,
And I hear these stories from guys who have gone to a urologist here in Palm Springs who is perhaps older and has no concept of, how gay men have sex and with what frequency. And I think that's an important conversation to have before you get into this with a urologist to make sure that they're at least gay friendly and know what you're talking about.
that's for sure.
So, you and I, as I said, have had a similar experience in that we both got our revisions, mine a little older than yours, but we both had it fail recently and have both gone through a revision. Um, Talk a little bit about what that failure was like. What happened the day that this occurred?
Well, for a couple weeks beforehand, I was noticing that I had to pump more to stay, at the same hardness, which wasn't right. And then one day, and it wasn't a particularly active scene. It was a little bit on the bland side, and
Hopefully,
nothing.
that wasn't
You
the one
know,
with me.
certainly not. Although it was acting up at that point, I was horrified at all times, for it not being staying very hard, and that was just a precursor to it failing completely.
So you went to pump it up and then nothing
Well, yes, eventually,
at the
then
very
it
end.
just
Yeah.
and it was nothing, and then it was obvious to me over the course of like 12 hours that all the saline had drained out. which was then proven with tests.
That was kind of my experience too, is that I was getting ready to have sex with someone and I pumped it and I was like, this doesn't seem quite as hard as it should. So I kept pumping and then pretty soon nothing. The pump went flat and I was like, all right, and
Mm,
your urologist will tell you, well, come see me. But if you have an implant and you get that, you pretty much know this is not good. You know that this is
yeah.
probably going to mean it needs to be replaced. So that is one thing about the implant. It is absolutely, totally amazing until it isn't. There isn't much in between.
It
I
was
mean, that's one thing.
it was also interesting because I wasn't totally dead beforehand, and so then when it breaks, you really are, and that was a real radical uh, feeling to wow, there's nothing, and it's the way a lot of guys are all the time,
Yeah,
and
it's
wow,
it's kind of a reminder, isn't it? I was like, it's like, oh, I would not want to go back to this struggle.
oh, God no, no. So even though mine failed in 2 years, and I don't know that we'll ever know exactly why, both of the cylinders were reported as burst, and they're supposed to be really, really tough to break.
Yeah, like a
And
million uses.
yeah, and my urologist just encouraged me. He said, "Use it, have fun." And even after the revision, he said, "Well, just keep going." I am going to be a little more careful.
I was
Uh,
going to say, since my revision, and again, we went through this within weeks of each other. I've had a little bit of hesitancy about it, and worrying. It's like, well, if I pump this up, it's one less use I'm going to have. Have you been going through that too?
well, I'm not cycling yet, but I have been thinking about. I really overdid in making up for lost time, and because I also wanted to kind of keep track of the efficacy of doxypep. I kept track, and it was about 2,600 guys in 2 years. So that really was pushing the envelope.
Well, I tell people, I estimate I had 3,000 uses, but that was over 5 years. But I'm not the overachiever here.
I was very, very busy at parties, especially.
But you point out to the people, and I saw that on your blog that you said, some of those cycles include masturbation because you do have to cycle it up for masturbation too. Uh, so
Exactly.
so I tell people those weren't all movies or whatever.
That's right. Well, and also I have had the thought regarding the pump itself wearing out, which it didn't in my case. That gee, if you go up and down like during parties,
Right,
I'll go down for oral so that they can deal with
right,
it, and then
right.
back up, and also I found a trick that in the last 6 months that's lots of fun where you inflate while you're in them, and it's something they don't feel with anybody that's not bionic, and it's outrageous.
So
It's lots of fun for the
yeah,
bottom.
let's talk about that for a second because people say, well, people who are unfamiliar with implants will say when you're meeting someone for the first time, you have to stop during sex and say, hold on, I've got to inflate this. I'm like, it's not like that. It's like if you have an implant, and I'm sure you've developed this as well, you find ways of triggering it to make it part of the experience, right? Like I will, if I'm making out with someone, reach down there and do a little bit, and then maybe they descend and they're giving you oral, then you can stop, kiss them, pump it some more, and you can integrate it into being part of the experience rather than a distraction. Is that kind of how you do it too?
Absolutely, and it's completely natural because uh, before I got an implant, uh, giving oral was the way to be sure that I got an erection. Well, you're doing that, and you could just pump it up at the same time, and you're done.
Exactly. I
It's
love doing
completely
that too.
natural.
I think that's, one of the best, tricks to it. I think people have this image that, there's going to be a grand pause and everything, and you're going to say, hold on, and it really doesn't work that way. It's kind of, as I say, after a few months, it kind of becomes fluid in your sexual experience, right?
Absolutely. And that's another big difference between trimix or the variants of that that really kills spontaneity. Oh, I've got to, go do this. And then if you're going into a club or something, it's a huge rush. Okay, now the clock is running, gotta hurry.
Before it
And
goes back down.
you're
Yeah.
right. And the freedom of never having to rush, of being able to interrupt what you're doing and do something else and have it make no difference whatsoever is just amazing.
Yeah, and I think, that, and also having to keep the trimix cold. I forgot about that aspect. If you're, I can
Yeah,
remember traveling to Europe and, stressing about whether or not it was going to stay cold on the 9 or 10 hour flight, LA to Barcelona, and with this, you don't have that stress anymore.
that's right.
Yeah, I certainly don't miss that. But I also want to stress to people if they're watching this, um, we are not here to say that implants are a good option for every man because it's a progression, right? If you're
Sure.
having problems, you start with oral medications like Viagra or Cialis. If perhaps that's not working, then talk to your urologist about moving on to bimix or trimix or quad mix. And then finally, if that's still not working or it's not a great option for you, then you talk about implants. So it's kind of a step process. And I don't want to give the impression to anyone that implants are where you start because that's certainly not it.
Well, and a lot of guys skip the whole step of cock rings or using a pump and then using a cock ring. And that's effective for a while, for half an hour
Sure.
perhaps. And so that's a whole lot better than nothing.
Well, let's talk about some of those misconceptions, and the cock ring was one of them. I've been asked that many times. If you have an implant, can you still use a cock ring? And what have you been told about that?
Clearly, the physicians are giving different answers. And mine says absolutely not, no way. It can be damaging. And at the same time, he encourages using a pump and a VED pump. And some surgeons tell their patients not to use a pump.
Yeah, for clarification, folks, we're talking about an external pump that fits over your member to pump it up.
Yeah.
The caveat that my doctor gives me about this is yes, you can use a pump, but you must remove the internal valve thing at the bottom. You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
the constriction.
The constriction. Thanks you.
Yes.
Constrictor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He
Yeah.
says it puts way too much stress at the bottom of the implant. So I get that. That makes sense.
Right.
As far as cock rings, he's told me nothing too constricting, but there are some fabric rings that you can buy that are wonderful. They give you just enough that don't put a lot of stress at the bottom. He's okay with that. He doesn't like anything that's too tight.
Right.
So another misconception that I hear all the time, one of the most common questions is, can you still have an orgasm? Can you still ejaculate with an implant?
And it makes no difference. With the proviso, because the psychological thing is so improved by being, rock hard, it's more likely that you're going to be able to come than without it. But it doesn't have a physical impact upon that.
What I always tell people about that is whatever your performance was before is likely what your performance will be after. In other words, if you have
Mhm.
not had prostate removal, then it's likely, and you were ejaculating before, you'll ejaculate off after. It doesn't
Yeah,
change that function. I think where that misconception comes is because there's a great percentage of men that have implants that have had prostate removal that
yeah,
cannot
yeah,
ejaculate. So the
yeah.
assumption has been connected that all men that have implants can ejaculate. I'm pretty sure where that's coming from, but as you and
Sure.
I both know, prostate's intact. We haven't had any issues with that. At least I haven't. And you said your confidence actually increased with that.
Wildly. Yeah.
What other misconceptions are you surprised at when people talk to you about this?
Sensitivity. A lot of guys are concerned about it impacting their sensitivity negatively, and it doesn't normally. And I don't know what's going on exactly, but with the revision, my sensitivity has gotten much better. And I don't know what to attribute that to.
Well, maybe it's because there's more in there because Kevin had, you said you had a 24 inch or 24 centimeter to start with. And this time in the revision, you got a 24 plus what we call rear tip extenders. So you said you got three rear tip extenders. So
Correct.
that's more than another inch that he got. So you got a lot more stuffed in there. So maybe that's why there's more sensitivity, right?
Perhaps, perhaps.
I went through the same thing. I went up. I was at a 22 and I got a 24, although I didn't get the rear tip extender. So you're still a little ahead of me there.
But
But I point out to people,
that
that people are very impressed by that number, especially more so people in Europe because no one here knows centimeters. But people are very impressed by that number. But I remind guys that probably 25 to 30% or more of our penis is inside our body. So
exactly.
you're not necessarily going to see that noticeable of an increase a lot in a lot of cases. People get very excited with revisions that, oh, it got that much larger. Sometimes you see more than others. So the doctor says, just wait and see how much you see that, when the swelling is all down.
Yeah, so far it's looking like I'm doing much better with this one. With the first one, I temporarily lost an inch and a half, which I got back in the first couple of months, just by cycling, and it didn't freak me out because having heard so many men's stories, I knew, okay, that's just common, and you're gonna get it back if you just follow the simple directions, which are actually kind of fun.
And I want to stress that this surgery is not about making you larger. That's not the purpose of implant surgery. However, a percentage of men do get larger, a percentage of men stay the same, and a small percentage actually lose some. So it happens on all
Yeah.
levels. And the purpose of an implant is a functional erection. It's not to make you larger. And I think people get very confused about that.
Oh, they absolutely do. And that's the very first thing that I say to anybody is they're not about getting larger. If that's your goal, don't. Of course, there is the nice side that it makes everyone an incredible shower when they're
Yeah.
flaccid.
Yeah, I mean, you can keep as little or as much in there any time of day as you want. So if you want to show a little more, maybe you're going out to the club or something, there you are, you have it. On the
Exactly.
other side of that, if you're going to church, you might want to put it down a little. So let's talk about, well, I'll just say it. Kevin and I made a movie just before both of our devices failed. And it was one of my only experiences having sex with another guy with an implant, at least so far. I want to ask you, for you, what it's like having sex with another guy who has an implant. What goes through your head?
um, well, excluding the time with you, which is, of course, something very, very different. I mean, you're the guy. You're the star of
Thank you.
implants
Thank
and
you.
and porn. So that one kind of doesn't count. But the other five guys, I guess, now, uh, it was nice. It was great because neither of you has anything to worry about. Uh, there's just no issue of normal man and the cycle of up a little, down a little, and all that. It's amazingly liberating, and it's wonderful to flip uh, with another bionic man.
Well, not what I always think is like, there's no reason to rush topping. There's no reason to, oh, well, I have to top quickly because it's going to go down. You're not thinking that. You're
That's
like,
right.
what goes through my head is like, oh my gosh, this is incredible because if we wanted to, we could F and do this all day long. There's nothing that could stop us from keeping going, except maybe getting hungry, that's more likely. But
Exactly.
that's what
So
makes me
I've even
excited.
I,
Yeah.
I quite agree. And yeah, at parties, I've had people bring over drinks and things, so I didn't have to stop at all.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, as you said, we have the luxury of if during sex we want to stop and have a conversation about politics, we can stop with a full heart on, talk for 20 minutes, and come right back to where we were.
exactly.
And people ask me all that time, it's like, well, what about being aroused? Do you still feel arousal? And I absolutely do. If I'm attracted to someone aroused, I definitely have the same feelings, the mental feelings and the sexual feelings and all the same stuff going on, right?
Well, and some of the same physical feelings too, because of the separate blood supply, um, for underneath and for the glands, and so that gets engorged naturally.
Right. I mean, as they say, arousal is something that's in the head. Your sexual arousal starts in the brain and then goes
That's
down
right.
there. I find, and people ask me this all the time, well, after you have an implant, you can't get a natural erection. Um, for some men, it depends because it depends on how much tissue your doctor has removed during the initial surgery. Some men, especially if they have a bigger penis, there's enough tissue in there that they can still get 40, 50% erect, even with the cylinders in there. But as I point out to them, if it wasn't working before, why are you concerned that it's suddenly going to start working and, oh, I won't be able to get a natural erection? You didn't
Right.
anyway, right?
Well, and as my surgeon pointed out to me, even if you try to squeeze out all the saline, there's still some in there.
Oh,
And
right.
so I was getting morning wood, not as intensely, but very clearly, uh, after the implant.
Yeah, I still on occasion will wake up and, find myself about halfway there. I'm like, oh, okay, well, and it doesn't happen often. Obviously, if it was a common occurrence, I wouldn't have gotten the implants in the first place, right? But it's a nice side benefit if you still have that tissue in there that happens, and that does happen for a percentage of men. I want to ask, as we get a little further into this, finding the right doctor to do this surgery is really important. Did you research? How did you find the right doctor?
I did a lot of research, mostly through the amazing site franktalk.org, which is that's the resource that kept me from freaking out all along the way, because there's so many other men's stories, and you see, oh, this is normal. This is just a typical thing. Uh, so I didn't worry about it.
I love that blog, but I also caution sometimes, some of the stories might scare people. When I was first researching, I was like, oh, but you hear more good than bad on there.
You do, even though, of course, just by human nature, people are more likely to post something when they have an issue rather than things are just going smoothly.
I think
But
that's true.
the doctors that are most often cited there tend to be East Coast doctors for some reason. Um, but I did the research and found the head of men's urology at UCLA, Jesse Mills, and very, very happy with the care. I think it's been extraordinary.
I feel the same way. For those listening, my doctor is Faisal Yafi at UC Irvine, who I researched for probably a year before I ended up picking him to do the surgery and the revision. And he's been great, good understanding of gay men's issues, super cool on that. I
Yeah,
want to mention your website one more time, bionicrod.com. Kevin has his OnlyFans, his Just for Fans, all of that connected to the website. My stuff is all at Dallas Steel XXX, both on Just for Fans and OnlyFans, also the same address on Twitter. So if you want to see me and Kevin in action with the implants, and I left all the pumping in there so people
right.
can see what we're doing. In fact, I even added a title at the bottom so people can know what's
Perfect.
going on. I think it'll be great for people to see that. We'll post a teaser connected to this in the Dropbox file, but then the X version obviously will not be available here. You'll have to go to one of the fan sites for that. But it's worth watching. Trust me, it's worth watching. We have about 5 minutes left, so I want to ask you one last question. That is, what would you like guys to remember about your experience with implants?
That it's a really good option if they fit the requirements, and they should tell their friends too, because sometimes it's a friend of a friend. And I'm getting so many messages every day, and I'm sure you do too, a lot more, from people asking questions, and then it's thrilling when they say, "Wow, I I'm doing it," or "I got it," and it's changed my life.
Yeah, my doctor tells me, thank you for all the men that you've referred for surgery.
So does
And
mine. Yeah.
and I joke with him, you owe me at least a 5 series, right? But
That's fine.
for me, hearing from these men all over the country that have struggled for years and then suddenly, they're the super stud, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I
I,
love
I've
that.
all exactly. I've also enjoyed most of them are straight that I communicate with, and they really drop all pretenses, and we're all honest with each other, and it's really refreshing.
Well, the thing about gay men and straight men is we both have penises. And
Exactly.
and I think uh penis issues and anything related to our performance, that's not a gay or straight thing. That's guys,
No,
period. All guys are concerned about that. That's not exclusive to us. But I've really enjoyed being able to share this experience with people, and I hope that it's helped. I'm told that it's helped. So,
I'm certain that it has.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining me on this, and maybe we'll do it again. Maybe we can get our doctors in on this.
Oh, that'd be great.
Wouldn't that be?
Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you very much. Kevin
Thanks a
Roderick
million.
of bionicrod.com. Check it out and check our movie out. Take care, guys.